Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Bitcoin Wells Deep Dive, a place for Bitcoin beginners or pros alike where we dive deep onto specific aspects of Bitcoin. Tonight, we're getting into some murky waters, I think, quantum computing. It seems like every few months there's another headline warning us that Bitcoin is over because quantum is going to hack your Bitcoins. It's certainly a topic that generates a lot of clicks and a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But how much of that fear is warranted, and how much of it is just nonsense? Speaking personally, I've developed a healthy skepticism of many aspects of modern science, which is largely government funded and manipulated. So my instinct is to ignore all the quantum fear porn. But is there real danger? To help us cut through the truth of the matter, we brought on a leading voice on that front. He's a prominent Bitcoin protocol engineer, one of the key minds behind the recent BIP 360 discussions, which outline a path toward quantum cryptography and Bitcoin, post-quantum cryptography and Bitcoin. You likely know him from his recent appearances at the Bitcoin conference or by his handle on X, Reardon Code. Please welcome to the deep dive, Brandon Black. Brandon. Uh-oh. Brandon, I've lost you.
I'm here. I'm to the other side now.
You're
Hi there.
Is it like Schrodinger's cat? Are you here or not here? I don't know. It shows up as a green screen for me. I'm not sure what happened.
Flip video off and on.
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Right, now you can see my messy room here.
Oh, we don't get the fun. He had a great unicorn background. How are you doing, man? Welcome.
I'm doing well. Excited to kind of present quantum topics to another audience. Hopefully, give as much as I can of the truth of the matter. I've tried to get to as much as I can a good understanding of where we really are, as opposed to either extreme.
Yeah, I know you've got a presentation. I'm not sure how at the ground floor you want to start with it, but I was just wondering. I mean, can you? Like, where do we start? Like, what's a qubit? Do we get into that, or do you want to kind of just take us to the next level immediately? Like, I feel like we could use a little a beginning here to get us started.
Well, yeah, I think let's do the presentation. I think the presentation that I have kind of covers how quantum is relevant to Bitcoin. I don't get into a lot of how quantum computing works. If we want to, after I talk about how it connects to Bitcoin, I'm happy to get into more of that. But let's start with the Bitcoin connections, and then we'll get into the more quantum depth if there's more questions.
Let's do it. Now your presentation. There she is.
Perfect. Yeah, so I titled this Quantum, the Threat That Isn't, because I think it's very important for us as Bitcoiners to be realistic about the threats to Bitcoin and the attacks on Bitcoin. And there's an interesting property of Bitcoin that I've been talking to many folks about recently, which is that Bitcoin fundamentally is strongest when it's under the most attack. Someone asked me actually at the Bitcoin is for Everyone conference last weekend, what actually worries me about Bitcoin? And my answer was a lack of threats. Like anything, the meme of good times, weak men, bad times, hard men, that applies to Bitcoin too. And so without threats, Bitcoin gets weak. And so whether quantum computing is going to advance and potentially attack Bitcoin, it's actually in some ways better if it does. So either way we look at it, quantum is not something I'm worried about for Bitcoin. I'd be more worried if there weren't threats. So that's our starting point. If quantum is real, Bitcoin is going to adapt and survive and be stronger. And if quantum is not real, then who cares? So there's really nothing to be overly stressed about. We should be ready. We should be responsive, all that stuff. But it really isn't a threat to Bitcoin itself. Now let's talk a little bit about quantum computing itself. And the first thing I want to say about that is, in theory, no one knows if quantum computers can be built that can solve real cryptographic problems. We've had many different theories of how quantum mechanics applies to the real world, and the two that would have to be one of the two that would have to be true in order for quantum computing to work is either what's called the many worlds hypothesis, in which in any given event that has a quantum property to it, the unpredictable nature of quantum phenomenon. We entangle some qubits, we read them out, we don't know what we're going to get till we read it. That's an uncertain event. And the many worlds hypothesis says that in those cases, both things happen, just in different worlds, right? So that's one possible theory. If that's true, then quantum computers can be built that can, in the future, maybe, in theory, break Bitcoin. The other possible hypothesis is what's called the Copenhagen explanation for quantum computing. And in that theory, rather than there being multiple worlds that are happening where all things happen, there's what people call this spooky action at the distance, where once you read the state of one entangled particle, only then does the other particle know what state to be in. And the problem with that, of course, is that how does the other particle know what state to be in when you read the first particle? Well, it can't unless there's spooky action at the distance. So those two theories, one of those two are really the only two quantum mechanical theories out there that would allow quantum computers to be built that could attack Bitcoin cryptography. We don't know if that's possible.
Is there any specific evidence for either of those that you're aware of? Like I feel like I've heard a lot about those, but they just seem very science fiction. I love science fiction, but I don't see what are they rooted in other than, well, could be. Like, who knows?
So the fundamental experiments, many in the audience are probably familiar with the the parallel slits experiment, where you get the interference pattern, even if you shoot single photons at a time at a pair of slits in an apparatus. And so those interference patterns tell us that something we don't fully understand is happening. And that's what these theories are based on. That's the evidence that one of these is, we think, true. However, they're not the only possible theories that explain the double slit experiment. One that was recently published is called the rational quantum mechanics, and it says that instead of there being either many worlds or the Copenhagen action at a distance, each photon that is shot has a state it starts with, which already kind of has a deterministic outcome when it goes through those two slits. Based on the exact energetic state, let's say, of the photon that shot at the slits, it is already fully calculated, let's say, where it's going to land. So there's not action at a distance. There's also not many worlds. It's that when the two particles were entangled and then separated, it was already deterministically known what their final state would be. It was just that we, pathetic humans, couldn't predict that state. And so when we read one, then we know the state of the other one. But when we shot those two particles across the space, they already knew what they were going to be.
That makes
sense. So that's the alternative theory.
It's interesting because it's all based on how we interpret the data. Really, it's like the experiment isn't necessarily proof of any one conclusion. It's just the results are the results, and how you interpret that depends on where you go with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's like an important point, because a lot of people in the quantum research field are like, the theory is definite. We know for sure that quantum computers can be built that'll break Bitcoin. And the fact is that we can't tell yet. The data is consistent with any of these three theories right now. And we have to do more work to figure out which one would be true. And that work might actually happen somewhat soon. One of the neat things in the rational quantum mechanics paper that came out recently is that if that theory is true, or not actually, we'll be able to tell whether the world is more consistent with rational quantum mechanics or many worlds or Copenhagen fairly soon as we build more complex quantum computers. So that's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Moving along, the next thing we want to talk about is quantum computing hardware. So as part of this baseline of, we're talking about quantum computing, people are trying to build quantum computers. And the takeaway here is that the task of building quantum computers to date has been Sisyphean. They keep building new quantum computing architectures. They invest millions or billions of dollars in developing a new architecture. They get to a certain point in developing that architecture, getting to a handful of logical qubits, and they hit a brick wall. And this has happened that I can count at least 5 times in quantum computing in the last 40-ish years. And I suspect that it may keep happening for at least a while longer. It's very difficult to build these things at the very least. And that's an important point that I think is overlooked again in the let's say the quantum, I don't want to call it FUD because that's not really true, but I'll just use that for the moment. The quantum FUD side of things is that with all of the time and money invested in these things, we keep running into brick walls. And so it's either impossible or at least very difficult to build a kind of working cryptographically relevant quantum computer. And so we should just be aware that when they say we're so close, they've pushed that ball that far up the hill many times before, and it's always rolled back down. So just be aware of that.
So is it possible that it really is like Sisyphus pushing the boulder and it never gets there? Or do you see evidence that there has been progress in the field?
Yeah, there is some progress. The most promising right now is a technology called neutral atoms. Yeah, I guess we can talk about that. Sure. So neutral atoms are kind of yeah, no, look, I've read a bunch about this stuff, so I have all kind of different stuff. So neutral atoms are super interesting within the quantum field. One, just because, speaking of science fiction, they have implemented some truly science fiction level technology to make these even work to the point they do already. They are using optical tweezers to move individual atoms around within a grid to make, you move two atoms close together, you entangle them, then you separate them to do computations, you move them then to a readout area to read the data. Like it's truly science fiction levels of development that they've accomplished using optical tweezers and laser cooling, where they shoot lasers at atoms to make them colder by bouncing off photons of higher energy than the laser puts in. Like the whole thing is science fiction, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
So
sounds like Star Trek.
Yeah, super cool stuff happening. Now, that said, they're still pretty early in developing neutral atoms. There's lots of theory happening around it. They have built devices that can indeed, put states into these things and do very simple computations on a handful of qubits within them. But they're nowhere near doing even kind of simple chemistry simulations or any kind of multi-step computation in a neutral atom quantum computer. So on the one hand, there's progress in this new promising direction. However, we don't know yet if that's going to hit a brick wall like other technologies have in the past. So I can't tell you right now whether it's going to be forever the Sisyphean task or if someday they're going to get that all the way up the hill. As of right now, it's still unknown.
What is the level of compute that they can do? Like, what's the most complex task a quantum computer can do at this point?
That I have been able to find, well, we have to look at it two different ways. Quantum computers have done in places where you want to simulate quantum effects, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. You're like, oh, I want to simulate how quantum phenomena would happen. They've done some pretty complex things. You can get a whole bunch of qubits together and simulate somewhat correctly quantum phenomena in a way you can't do in a classical computer. That's where I think Google published a paper that said, the quantum supremacy is here. We did something that no classical computer can do, but what they did was they simulated a quantum phenomena better than any classical computer. But that makes sense because it was a quantum computer simulating quantum phenomena. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, if you're trying to do digital computations where you need to get an exact bit computation done using a kind of an algorithm, in that we're talking a very small handful of qubits at most. And even when people have done computations on those handful of qubits, the difference between the results and randomness have been very hard to tell. So it's like low fidelity, handful of qubits. That's why the joke comes out with, have you factored 21 yet with a quantum computer? And the answer is, well, kind of. Depends how you look at it. Not really. So very, very limited when you're talking about digital computations that would be applicable to cryptography. Speaking of where people talk about this and where we are, the experts out there that are saying, quantum computing, this roadmap, we're going to have these many qubits by this date. As you've kind of heard from what I've said already, they actually don't know that. The roadmaps you hear, the folks posting about where it's like, oh, this company has said they're going to have these many qubits by that date. That's been claimed many times. They don't know. And we shouldn't take them at face value when they say that. I think that's one of the big errors that happens in people that are very worried about quantum computing and Bitcoin. They're just taking many companies' roadmaps and saying, these roadmaps are facts.
Yeah.
Therefore, there's going to be a quantum computer that can break Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever on this date. Like, okay, when was the last time that a like very complex engineering roadmap by some company actually happened on the date they said it was going to happen?
Yeah. The incentives
really
are definitely there to fib a little bit and make it sound more impressive. You know, it's like, where's the incentive here?
Yeah. So they don't know. They're still Sisyphus. They're still pushing that rock up. And the truth is, right now the rock is making progress. So they kind of predict the rock is going to keep going up at the same rate it's gone up with this technology for so long. But that's not been the case.
I'm sure there won't be any complications. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, don't just accept these things without being critical. I say this every time I talk about quantum. Many of people watching and many people out there are smart enough to go read the papers themselves. It's not magic. It may look like science fiction, but you can read these things and make your own conclusions. Don't trust me. Don't trust the experts. They don't know. I don't really know. I have my opinions based on reading the papers, but no one knows.
Great point.
So now we're really going to get into what do we do in Bitcoin today? Because I think that's the next most important topic, other than the experts don't know, and quantum is in this kind of unknown state. You might say quantum's in a quantum state of going to work and not going to work. So what should we as Bitcoiners be doing with our Bitcoin today, given the unknown state of this? And there's really two things. The first thing is, don't reuse addresses. This is important for both privacy and for some cases of quantum computing can be somewhat protective of your Bitcoin. So let's say you're someone who looks at what I'm saying here and looks at the unknown state of quantum computing and says, I'm a little bit worried about this. What can I do to limit my exposure to any kind of quantum computer? First thing, don't reuse addresses. And the second thing is manage the size of your UTXOs. I'm going to have to do a little bit of explaining here because I don't know where everyone is on their Bitcoin knowledge. So in Bitcoin comes in discrete little packets called UTXOs. You might think of them similar to the size denominations of bills in your wallet with cash. It's not just the balance you see. There's not just 10 million sats in your wallet. You probably have one UTXO that's 5 million sats and one UTXO that's 1, and then whatever else. So your Bitcoin comes in these little packets, and depending on the size of those UTXOs, you get different benefits and drawbacks. If your UTXOs are too large, then one, you're more vulnerable to a quantum computer. If you think about some future, someday quantum attacker, they want to steal some Bitcoin. They have to crack, if you don't reuse addresses, so C number one, don't reuse addresses. If you don't reuse addresses, each UTXO they want to steal, they have to crack another public key back to its secret key. That's going to be time consuming, maybe costly for quantum computers, at least initially, and maybe forever. So if they have to do that and it's expensive each time, they're going to go after big UTXOs to get the most Bitcoin they can each time they crack a key. So if your UTXOs are very large, there's two problems. One, that, and then two, privacy. When you spend that big UTXO, you tell whoever you're paying with that big UTXO that you had a big UTXO. So you don't want, that's like if you went to a store and you paid for your gum with a $100 bill, now the clerk knows you have $99 walking out, you're now a theft target. So same goes for Bitcoin. You don't want to have huge UTXOs in your wallet. On the flip side, if your UTXOs are too small, you have to pay a fee when you spend your Bitcoin for each UTXO, not each transaction. Transactions have a little bit of overhead, but the main cost of spending Bitcoin is paying for each UTXO to be spent. And so if your UTXOs are too small, imagine if you pay with pennies, but then there's like a 1 penny fee on each penny you spend at the store. That's going to suck. But if you pay with dollars and there's a 1 penny fee, it's no big deal. So you kind of want to have your in-between sized UTXOs, and that protects you from the initial expensive quantum computers. It also protects your privacy, and it also protects you from high fees. Medium-sized UTXOs. I like to use kind of 1 million sats as a reasonable sized UTXO, but pick a number that kind of fits your usage for your wallet. The colder your storage is, the bigger your UTXOs might want to be. Up to some boundary where you think they're going to be vulnerable to being attacked by a quantum computer. If you've got 50 Bitcoin in the UTXO, well, first of all, good for you, and secondly, you might want to split that up for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, even if quantum isn't real, this is a great a great practice to have anyway. Just keep track of your UTXOs and practice spending them in that way. It really helps you think about what you have in a different way too when you're organizing them and making transactions.
Yeah, it's not just a single wallet balance. It's a bundle of UTXOs. The next thing I want to say, we're talking about quantum. How worried should we be? If there is a break of Bitcoin because of a quantum computer, recovery will be possible. I was talking with Tad Draya in Vegas at the HRF stage, and he's got to have more ideas than you can count about ways to recover people's Bitcoin if there were to be a need to disable kind of current elliptic curve based spending conditions in Bitcoin because of a quantum computer. I don't want to get into the details of these things, but suffice it to say, while it would be a big disruption and it would probably have a significant impact on the usability of Bitcoin for some time, most likely we would be able to recover people's ownership of their Bitcoin in the event of a quantum break. There's a lot of reasons for that. Again, I don't want to get into all the details, but just keep that in mind. It's not like, oh, a quantum computer broke Bitcoin and now Bitcoin is just dead.
Yeah.
No, much more likely we develop a process to recover Bitcoin. Maybe that has kind of a long-term impact on the feasibility of the system, but it's not destroyed. It's not dead. It just has kind of some impact.
What, maybe this is too theoretical as well, but what's like the most likely attack vector of quantum? Like, would it be able to just break your private key from your public address? Are there other ways it could attack or might be more likely to attack?
I'm glad you asked. The only known challenge for Bitcoin is the ability to take a public key once exposed and find its secret key. That's called breaking the elliptic curve discrete log problem. That's the whole foundation of Bitcoin's transaction security is elliptic curve discrete log. Both Shor signatures and ECDSA signatures rely on that same premise. And that's what quantum can potentially reverse. There's no known threat to Bitcoin's mining algorithm or the chain of blocks, the hashes that secure one block to the next. There's no threats that we know of in that area. It's specifically the transaction security. And so you can imagine a scenario where, let's say someone builds a quantum computer, but it takes, 5 gigawatt hours of energy to break each public key into a secret key. So only the world's biggest wallets, like the Coinbase and MicroStrategy sized wallets, would be vulnerable to that because they would never have enough energy to go attack even Satoshi's 50 Bitcoin UTXOs when it takes so many gigawatts of energy to do it, or gigawatt hours. So we need to kind of think about our threat modeling for quantum in that way, where there's one specific thing it breaks, and whether it's worth breaking any specific public key into its secret key depends on how much it costs to run that quantum computer.
That's interesting too, because you're saying you feel like Bitcoin is stronger when it's being attacked. In a way, that would definitely incentivize the network to become more decentralized if that did happen. Like Coinbase would be the most hurt in that scenario because they're holding so much Bitcoin centrally. So
right, they both reuse addresses and have massive UTXOs. So
they're like the biggest target. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a sense in which if there's a slow, costly quantum computer, it just helps improve the decentralization of large holders. So yeah, again, we shouldn't be stressing about quantum is kind of the central message here. We should be mindful, we should be ready, but not necessarily stressed.
Don't panic.
All right. So speaking of being ready and mindful, where this segues perfectly into my next thing, and you mentioned in the kind of posts about this, we should talk about what is happening right now in Bitcoin that is going to make it more resistant, more resilient to quantum in the future. And so there's one BIP out there that is, I would say, a decent candidate for being added to Bitcoin, and that's BIP 360. Originally, when they started working on it, they wanted to make BIP 360 kind of a full quantum resistance proposal, where it would have a new address format and a new signature format all in one big BIP to make Bitcoin quantum resistant. As it developed, it turned out two things turned out to be true. One, we don't yet know what the right post-quantum signature algorithm is, so that couldn't be in there. And two, it was just too much to do in one BIP. So BIP 360 today is just a new address format called P2MR, pay to Merkle root. This compares with P2TR, pay to Taproot, The difference is that BIP360 does not have the elliptic curve key embedded in the root. As we just talked about, elliptic curve keys are what are vulnerable to quantum computers potentially. And so P2MR takes that out of the root of the address and therefore makes the address itself quantum resistant in a way that pay to Taproot addresses are not. The trade-off, it costs more to spend pay to Merkle root than it costs to spend Taproot or pay to Taproot. And so people who are more concerned about quantum would be able to use P2MR for their addresses, and people who are less concerned could keep using P2TR. I think it's a great option for us to have. And I personally hope that this gets activated on the network to give people that choice, depending on how concerned they are about quantum. And you can even see the single person using both, right? So if I'm someone who has a hot wallet that I spend from every day, I'd keep that on Taproot because I cycle through those UTXOs regularly. If a quantum computer comes up, I'll move it later, but I change it regularly. My cold storage that I have the keys like multi-sigged all over the world, I might put that in P2MR because it'd be a longer process for me to migrate that. I might also have bigger UTXOs there. So I'm more worried about quantum on my cold storage than on my hot storage. So it's a great option to have. BIP360 is cool. Support it with your local miner, I guess.
Because that's such a crux of the issue. Could you try to take a stab at explaining the elliptic curve? What did you call it? Because I'm like, what does that mean exactly? I'm like, I can't explain it.
Absolutely. Okay. The simplest way to explain it is actually to forget elliptic curves for a minute. Let's just talk about the discrete log problem. So discrete logs, start with simple math. If I say, what's 5 divided by 3? Everyone can say 5 divided by 3 is 2.67, right? Now, what if I say, what's 5 divided by 3 with no decimals? I'm doing this poorly.
It's okay.
Let's go even a little simpler on it. To find a logarithm, you have to be able to kind of think about what it would take to exponentiate to a given value. So like 2 to the 4th is 16. To find a logarithm of 16, the 4th logarithm of 16, you have to know that 2 to the 4th is 16. Now, what if I said, I'm doing this in a number system where the top number in the system is 9? So 2 to the 4th in that number system is 7 because you hit 9 and then you wrap back around and you get to 7. The problem is now you have 7 and you want to find the 4th, the log base 4 of 7, but you don't know what that is because it's not like you just went all the way up to 16. The log base 4 of 16 is easy. But what was the base that got you to 7? Well, there are many different possible powers of 2, let's say, that would get you to that same 7 because it wraps around a bunch of times. This is the basis of all of Bitcoin's elliptic curve cryptography, is the difficulty of reversing this discrete logarithm. When the number of possible values is limited because it wraps around, suddenly this is much more difficult than if it goes all the way up to kind of unlimited large numbers. That's really what it comes down to, and that's what quantum computers can theoretically reverse, is that discrete log, and it also applies to elliptic curves. There, better explanation.
Like using a secret number system that has its own language that you're not sure how it, how many times it wrapped around, and how would you be able to tell because it just looks like a regular number anyway.
Right. It always wraps around somewhere in the same value range, and so Bitcoin's elliptic curves are on a field with a certain modulo called, I think it's called P, and so every number in there is always mod P. You do this and then mod P. So, there's something I wanted to say about that. Oh, so the reason elliptic curves the reason quantum computers can maybe solve this is that if you think about what we just said, that the discrete log involves this kind of undoing the wrapping around of numbers. There's Shor's algorithm is an algorithm that makes period finding tractable in a way that it is not for humans, but can be for quantum computers, or not for classical computers, but can be for quantum computers. And so you can say, what's the period of this exponent, essentially, on this number system, as you said. And that's what Shor's algorithm can do, is find the period, and that lets you then find what the exponent was, even though it's wrapping around.
I feel like I understood that.
I mean, yeah, not the best explanation, I admit.
No, that was. I feel like I understand. I definitely understand it better now than I did before. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, so that's what we're dealing with. That's why quantum computers apply here, is that you can set up a quantum computer in a state where the output of the quantum computer is essentially a frequency that represents the period of some values. And that lets you kind of come back to this, what exponent was I dealing with?
Yeah, kind of finding your way backwards in a weird way through the...
Yeah. It's being able to go backwards, even though there's this discontinuity because of the discreteness of the logarithm.
So that's what, so with that, so how is BIP360 going to help with that? Is it just by creating a new algorithm that will be harder to backtrack?
So BIP360, as of now, does not create a new signing algorithm. That's an important point for everyone to be aware of. BIP360 gives us an alternative address format where the address itself does not contain an elliptic curve public key. It contains a hash. And hashes are not vulnerable to Shor's algorithm. So as far as we know, hashes are not really vulnerable to quantum computers. And so by making the address into a hash, it's now a safe address format within which to put a new quantum algorithm. We don't yet have the quantum safe signature algorithm picked out. There's a bunch of research happening over at Blockstream Research, especially in Shrinks and Sphinx, and you might have heard of some of these things, where they're working on finding us a good quantum resistant algorithm to put inside BIP360. BIP360 just gives us a wrapper in which to put that safe algorithm.
It seems almost like we'd have to wait for the attack almost to know what solution we needed. Is there a way? Is there a way they could conclude before then, or would we kind of have a bunch of options waiting in the wings until we know, oh, this one solves it?
It's a good question. No, we can know, because we know Shor's algorithm already. So we know if a quantum computer were to be possible, we know what algorithm it would try to run on us. And so we can make a signature algorithm that is not vulnerable to that. And we can do that today. We actually have algorithms that are known to be safe from that. There are two problems with them. One, they're still relatively new cryptographically speaking, and there have been vulnerabilities found in them in recent years, not the ones that we're talking about, but others of related types, vulnerabilities that were, things that elliptic curve is not vulnerable to, but these were. And so one of the things we would probably do if we did put a new signature algorithm in Bitcoin is we'd suggest, at least initially, that people use it with elliptic curve cryptography as well. So you'd use both. It would be an expensive way to spend Bitcoin, but it would mean that you have all the security we already know is secure about elliptic curves, and you also have the security against quantum, because you say it has to have this valid signature and that valid signature together to spend the Bitcoin. And that would be at least an initial thing. Don't use just the new post-quantum stuff, because it's still relatively new cryptographically speaking. There could be a vulnerability in there. Anyway, so we kind of use two different pieces to get protection from two different problems. So we can pick an algorithm without seeing the quantum computer. And another thing that I want to say, and I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, so we're talking about this already. Post-quantum signatures aren't ready. That said, we're working on them. And what we really want here is we don't just want post-quantum signatures. We actually also want post any other problem with elliptic curve cryptography. There have been specific elliptic curves in the past where someone has found a classically reducible pattern to the elliptic curve itself that means you can break that curve. Now, as far as we know, because it's been active on Bitcoin for 16 years and it was developed even before that, there's no such pattern or problem in SegWit 256K1 that Bitcoin uses. But it's not impossible that we find some vulnerability in the curve itself. That means we need new cryptography. And so we should really be thinking about not just getting post-quantum signatures ready and putting those in the BIP360 wrapper, but really just putting some new signature scheme that protects us from any problem, whether it's quantum or something else that could break our existing cryptography, and put that in BIP360 Peta-Merkle root. So blockchain research, and again, others are working on new signature algorithms for Bitcoin. And these could be post-quantum, they could be just post anything. The point is we I think do have a need for new cryptography, not tomorrow, but over time for Bitcoin, because there could be a break, whether it's quantum or otherwise, in the existing cryptography.
That makes sense. Yeah, again,
I think my message here is the slow and steady message. Like, we've got P2MR, it's in progress. We should implement it. We should keep doing research on new signature schemes, whether they're post-quantum or just generally post-SecP, and get those ready and keep on chugging along, basically.
Yeah, and it sounds like stuff that's good to do regardless, whether the quantum is real or not. It's still stuff we can harden Bitcoin, and like you said, make it stronger, because there's the potential of attack. It's going to get stronger anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really where I wrap up this little slideshow I had, is Bitcoin marches forward. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I made the background dim on purpose, but there's a chain of Bitcoin links going across the screen there. And that's really the message I wanted to put out is, one, quantum really isn't a threat right now and maybe never. But two, Bitcoin is going to march forward and improve and have, I would say, long before quantum could break it, we'll have a new signature algorithm in Bitcoin, and we won't have to worry about it. We're moving forward. The research is happening. Don't listen to anybody who says, Bitcoin core developers aren't working on quantum. I think Adam Back was saying that most of Blockstream research is working on new signature algorithms for Bitcoin. This is a topic that has great focus on it, rightfully so, because if it were to break, it'd be a really bad thing. But it's not urgent, and the research is happening.
Yeah, I feel a lot better already.
Great.
Well, I have some more questions, and there's a couple questions in the chat already. If anyone watching has any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I'll get to you. I'll just do a couple of mine real quick before we dive into the chat. The one thing that I was thinking about a lot in relation to this is, like, I don't know if you're following like the replication crisis in the sciences, but like, for anyone that doesn't know, there's like a ton of studies and papers that have been published, especially in like psychology and social sciences. So it maybe tends to be more in the softer sciences, but where the papers just can't be replicated. People try to redo the studies and prove the same results, and it just doesn't add up. I was just wondering, from someone from your perspective that's read a lot of the papers and everything dealing with quantum, do you see a similar thing of like a replication issue in quantum? Like, is there a lot of stuff that just there's no real proof of it, and it's just, oh, they published this and we have to take them at their word? Do you see something like that?
It's not quite the same thing that I've seen, but there has been an exaggeration phenomenon, let's say, in quantum publications, where like I mentioned, there was the Google paper where they said, quantum supremacy, and it's better than any classical computer. But they'd only shown that it was better at simulating quantum things.
Yeah.
It's like, so they published it as quantum supremacy. But then if you read the full text of the paper, it's quantum supremacy over quantum simulations. And so we need to be very careful of those exaggerations. And that's been somewhat common in the quantum world. To my happiness, actually, the papers tend to be replicatable, and people can go and apply the techniques described in the papers to other tasks in the quantum research area. So I think, it being a harder science, there is not that same replication crisis as in softer sciences, fortunately. But exaggeration crisis, yes.
So it is a harder science, you think? It's because I know it's math based, but it just seems it's a lot of theoretical stuff. So it always makes me wonder, like, does it really connect? Does it connect back to the real world, or is it just up in the clouds? Like,
yeah, and there have been papers where they
it's like debating how many angels are on the head of a pin. Those things that you can't ever really prove, but people will debate about it endlessly.
Yeah, so there have been papers where but I think this is understandable. Like, I don't think this is a major problem in quantum research, where there'll be a new theoretical way to do error correction. that they think will have all these properties when they apply it to a real quantum computer. And then someone builds the appropriate quantum computer to use that. They try to do the error correction, and the results are very poor. So that has certainly been happening, but I wouldn't necessarily call that kind of a replication crisis. That's really just a we're learning what the math actually is situation. And sometimes they've actually had success, and there's been publications and real world demonstrations where now Google has managed to make error correction work, and it took a bunch of different tries to get error correction to really actually bring the error levels down on some of these qubits. But again, it's not like a angels on the head of the pin. It's just there's theory, and then someone goes and tries to build that, and they figure out what was wrong with the theory. They adjust the theory. They go back and do some more theory, and they come back and build it.
That's fair enough. I mean, that's science. You have a theory, you test it. All right, back to the drawing board. Yeah,
and that's something that's worth talking about in the quantum world. One of the challenges with quantum is that long cycle I just described. I laugh whenever I think about the roadmaps that folks publish. The roadmaps seem to assume that there's not going to be this, okay, go spend like 18 months doing new theory, then build the new device that takes a year to build, then see if the theory works, get to the limit of that, and then go back to theory for 18 months. Like, it's a very slow cycle it's not just software where you just kind of tell to the AI and try again. It's a very, very slow cycle of extremely smart people doing very difficult math and then bringing it to the real world. So building a difficult to build physical thing and then testing it and then doing that again, which takes literally years per iteration. So quantum computers certainly might happen, but the cycle time is slow, and it's going to be a Sisyphean task until suddenly maybe it's not.
Yeah, it's like the problem of the salespeople selling your new software, and they make all these promises about what it can do, and then you have to bring it back to the devs to actually create it, and it takes a year to do that. So yeah. One other quick question before we get into the chat questions I had. There was a recent news article about that whale, which is kind of a strange story, but the whale that's supposedly purposely, I guess we don't really know, sent their coins to the burn address. And I was wondering if there might be a way, like, I guess theoretically, for quantum computing to create a private, because there is no private key, I guess, for that address. Could it create one that fits somehow? Like, is there a way to make addresses that are non-functional functioning with quantum computing?
It depends on the address type. Most likely no, because I think the known burn addresses are kinds where that's not possible. So most burn addresses that I've seen, I didn't look at what address this one was. I remember seeing the story, but I didn't check what the address was.
Yeah.
Most burn addresses have been made using hashes. And if it's a hashed burn address, you would have to be able to have a chosen plain text hashing attack against SHA-256, which quantum computers do not help us make, in order to potentially make that spendable. So, the problem is that whatever hashes to that value isn't an address that Bitcoin would be able to validate. Because normally in hashed address types, the hash is of a script or of a key. And if there's not a specific input pre-image that is a valid key,
I see,
you can't spend it no matter what.
There's nowhere to go back.
Nowhere to go back. Yeah. So as far as I know, no, a quantum computer could not revive those coins.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, let's go ahead. If you have any questions now, throw them in. I'm going to jump in and see. We got a couple here, and then I have more of my own. Let's see. I don't know how to say that. Kerpel. Aurora. If someone scammed my Bitcoin, can I get back that money? No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left that in there. I forgot about that one. Yeah, there's no way to get that back. And someone in the chat said, well, yeah, maybe with quantum computing in the future. But no, if someone got your Bitcoin, it is gone, my friend. All right. JT says, I've lost it. Where to go? These days, is it safe to use paper wallet through bitaddress.org? Is it a little safe? Oh man, I can't. Safer paper wallet with a strong password through bitaddress paper wallet. That's not sorry, but I don't know about that. I don't know what that is.
Well, I'll say this. I do not recommend paper addresses in general, paper wallets in general. I think that was a good technology in the days before hardware signing devices get yourself a good hardware signer. There are plenty out there. I won't shill any here, but there are plenty out there. Do some research and get one. It is way, way better than a paper wallet for so many reasons.
Oh, definitely. But and that's separate from writing your seed phrase on paper, right? You're talking about
right. Paper
wallet. I've never
was
actually used a paper wallet, but yeah, with the QR code and you send it to the that stuff is
sketchy.
Very sketchy. Very sketchy. All right. Next question from John Galt, appropriately, says, are the new PT or P2MR address much larger than other address formats?
No, they're actually the same size as an address as Peta Taproot. They are 32 weight units, otherwise known, or 33 weight units, otherwise known as 8 V-bytes more expensive per input to spend. It's about, I think it's about 10% more expensive per input to spend than a Peta Taproot. If you're using single signature Peta Taproot, the single signature Peta Merkle root would be about 10% more expensive in fees. So it's not a huge difference. The address itself is the same size. No huge differences here to get your security from quantum or some limited security from quantum.
Another good question from John Galt. If not quantum, what could break Bitcoin's cryptography? Are there more pressing risks than quantum?
We don't know is the answer. I mentioned kind of the possibility of there being a vulnerability built into the elliptic curve itself. What we can say is that crypto systems have broken because of classical research in the past. We had to stop using MD5. We had to stop using SHA-1. We had to stop using certain types of AES encryption. Many cryptographic systems have broken because of classical analysis that reduced the difficulty of breaking their keys. No crypto system has ever broken because of quantum. So this doesn't rule out the quantum future. It's just to say that we can't rule out a classical break of elliptic curve cryptography or of SegP256K1 in particular. It could happen. We can't rule it out. So we should just be mindful that when we're talking about post-quantum, really we should be talking about it as post-SegP256K1. We have one specific crypto system in Bitcoin that all of our addresses rely on right now. And we should definitely be developing future crypto systems that resist attacks on that specific crypto system because it could happen from quantum or elsewhere.
Yeah. Just diversifying our chances at defense, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. John Galt again asks, any comments on photonic computers? I don't know anything about that.
I'm a skeptic. I did a small amount of research on this. It was a while ago now. And what I came up with was basically there are major reasons why photonic computers are more difficult to build and scale than electronic transistor-based computers. That doesn't mean that'll always be the case, but it is a very difficult thing to build on the scale of the difficulty of building a quantum computer. And so I would not necessarily expect these to accelerate attacks on Bitcoin or benefits to Bitcoin, mining or anything. I don't think photonic computers are kind of a likely technological branch to be looking down.
Yeah. Let's see here, Eric. So back to UTXO size balancing. Is it reasonable? Let's see. Is it reasonable to right size UTX to say a percentage of your net worth or some other more personalized measure? I would just say it is a personal choice. However you want to size your UTXOs. Probably more than 1,000 and probably less than multiple millions of Satoshis. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is like a lot of people think about Bitcoin like it has to be this or it has to be that. I mean, it's a technology, try it out, test it out, see what you like. You're not like trapped into anything completely. If you test it out and see what works for you. What are your thoughts, Brandon?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said in earlier, it really depends on how frequently you spend from that wallet for multiple reasons. if you spend frequently, when you see fees starting to go up, you can always consolidate your UTXOs early, like on the weekend when the fees dip back down a bit before they rise any higher. If it's a wallet you don't have quick access to, you might be like, oh, I can't get to that wallet for a few weeks, and in the meantime, the fees get much higher, and now it's harder to do consolidation. So you want to have bigger UTXOs in your colder storage, it's harder to access, and you can use smaller UTXOs safely, especially in a low fee environment. Like right now, fees have mostly been below 1 sat per vbyte. So it's pretty safe to use, like you said, even as low as 1,000 sats in a UTXO, you're not going to lose too much of that in transaction fees. So I would say kind of general advice. I don't like having UTXOs in my wallet any smaller than about 50,000 sats or any bigger than about 2-ish million sats. So that's kind of my range, which is still a pretty big range. You can have a lot of different sizes and it's fine. But you just don't want to have the extreme tiny and the extreme large.
Yeah, and it's good to have a variety in some ways too, because when you want to spend, then you can pull from the UTXOs that roughly match what you want to spend anyway. So you're not having to pull from 50 different UTXOs or do one massive UTXO for a small, transaction. Let's see, one more here from Michael Lee. For cold storage wallets to eventually be quantum resistant, oop, I just lost it. Is that likely going to be just via firmware update or to existing wallets or new hardware purchase?
It's a little hard to know right now. This is a great opportunity to talk about some of the specifics of the potential post-quantum signature algorithms that are being worked on, or just post-SecP. Yeah. So if it's a hash-based signature, there's a decent chance it would be a new hardware purchase. Unfortunately, the hash-based signatures require more compute and often more memory than the existing hardware wallets have. And so many of them wouldn't be able to compute it. Some of the newer ones, like I'm going to stay away from mentioning brands. Some of the newer ones that have a little bit more powerful chips might be able to do it with the existing hardware with the firmware update, but most of them are probably going to need a new hardware. On the other hand, there are other types of post-quantum signatures out there. One that I'm very interested in right now, and I wrote about in the Optech newsletter a while back, is isogeny-based cryptography. There's a guy out there called Conduition who's a Bitcoin researcher, and he's been posting about it. And the short version of isogeny-based cryptography is that it still uses elliptic curves, but is not protected by the elliptic curve discrete logarithm. So the only known attack on elliptic curves from quantum is against the elliptic curve discrete algorithm or logarithm. So it's actually okay to keep using elliptic curves maybe. And isogeny-based crypto could therefore be a safe upgrade. And that, because it still uses elliptic curves, because it's not much bigger or harder to compute than current Schnorr and ECDSA signatures, that could be a firmware update to existing wallets. So my answer here is it depends on what the next cryptographic primitive we use is. I personally am very optimistic that we'll find a new signing method for Bitcoin that lets us keep using existing hardware, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah. No, that's very insightful. I didn't even think about that, about the hardware wallets themselves not being physically able to compute at whatever level you need them to for the new hashes. That's interesting. Yeah, I've got another question here. So recently, people were a few months ago. I guess it's hard to say recently in this news cycle, but it feels like recently. The idea was floated by other devs talking about like potentially freezing Satoshi's coins and maybe other coins to make them quantum resistant. We kind of spoke out about that as being kind of ridiculous. I'm curious to know what you have to say about that, and if even taking the morality or whatever as philosophy aside, is it even like, would that actually help? What would that actually do? I'm just kind of curious to hear what you have to say.
So it's a big topic that a lot of people have been pushing on, including some friends of mine have been pushing for the potential for freezing them. I am with you. Your kind of default of I don't think we should be freezing people's coins, even if they're vulnerable to a quantum attack. And my argument for that comes back to one of the things I put in my presentation and why it was there actually, is that we don't know how costly it's going to be for these quantum computers if they're built to break a key. If it's costly to break a key, then the smallest holders out there can still keep using their SecP 256K1 based keys forever. And so if we were to do something that freezes all SecP 256K1 based spends, we would just destroy that small holder use case when there's no risk to them from quantum, even if it's somewhat expensive. Like, let's say the quantum computer, I said it could take many gigawatt hours of energy, but what if it just takes $50 worth of energy, right? Everybody using Bitcoin whose UTXOs are smaller than $50 is still totally safe with the existing cryptography. And so I can't see any way where we would like block spends of larger amounts, larger UTXOs, but not smaller ones. I just don't see a way to make a sensical change that doesn't unnecessarily steal coins from smaller holders in order to prevent Satoshi's coins from moving. So I come down on the side of we should just let it go and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. It's like that meme, are we the baddies? now you become the ones doing the harm to the network. Like what is the point at that point? I don't know. Well, this has been a great conversation. I kind of want to, this may be a quick wrap because you kind of already talked about this, but other than UTXO management, is there anything else that people can do right now at home to make themselves their Bitcoin more safe against quantum computing?
I would say not really. My takeaway message, though, is to stick to the original Bitcoin ethos that has been with us for so long of do your own research, don't trust, verify. Don't trust the experts on quantum or the experts. We all got into Bitcoin, most of us, by ignoring the experts who said Bitcoin was a scam, right? Don't abandon that mindset when you look at quantum or anything else, frankly. So really don't trust the experts. Don't trust me. Do your own research. Quantum research papers are things that you, a person with an intelligent mind, can read. And really that's what's going to protect you from quantum is doing your own research, because then you'll know when it's time to do something else.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to wrap. Yeah. Because I think that's a big issue in society in general, and why Bitcoin is so important is because so much of the powers that be just don't want you to trust in yourself and your own cognition and your own ability to think and make decisions. And that's repeated so much in government and the sciences, and even in crypto, like largely, like so much of it is about pushing not self-custody, but trusting a third party, which was kind of the whole thing we were trying to get out of. But yeah, thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on. This has been an awesome conversation. And that brings us to what we do too at Bitcoin Well. Like our main thing is about you holding your own Bitcoin. Like in the States, we are the only exchange that is self-custody. So we want you to custody your Bitcoin. We don't ever hold your Bitcoin. We want you to hold it. We don't want you to have to trust a third party to hold your Bitcoin. And that's what we're about. So if you want to check us out online. We're also putting out educational content like this. And thank you so much, Brandon. Is there anything else you want to say at the end here, Brandon? Anything you want to plug?
I'll just say I do Bitcoin consulting. So if you or your company might need my general expertise, you've heard some of the things I know about, look me up. I'm on the internet on Reardon Code on most platforms.
Definitely, man. Yeah, when the quantum threat arises, we'll call you immediately. Your phone's going to be ringing off the hook at that point.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zach.
Thank you, man. Everyone have a great night, and thank you so much for tuning in. You can find the replay. We'll send you an email, and it'll be on YouTube later as well. So thank you, guys. Everyone have a great night. Bye.